Welcome to the I/O Saturation Tutorial Screencast by Jean Lalande and Sylvain Petitclerc. First of all, we need the usual connection to the database. You can connect to any database you want since you will create the required table in the tutorial. In this screencast, we will use the I/O saturation scenario, which is in Learn, I/O cost scenarios, I/O saturation. The first page you see in this tutorial is the introduction. It explains what you will learn after you complete the different steps displayed at your left. The first step is to create the abstracts table that will use a club column to hold our data. Once the query is executed, you can see a success message at the bottom right of the page. In the second step of the I/O scenario, we populate the newly created table. The query showed here will insert 10k times the text displayed here as lubs. You should see a succeeding message once it complete. Now we need to check the data we just insert. Without them, we won't be able to saturate the system properly. The reason why we cast the club column as varchar is to be able to see the content of the column. Otherwise, all the objects would be displayed as club. As you can see, the abstracts table has been populated correctly. The next step is to find the upper bound I/O limit of your system by saturating it. By modifying the ranges inside the dashboard XML file, you will get proper values displayed in the indicators. To find the limit we need, we will check the two columns, I/O intensity and delta reads. You will execute a workload profile that saturates the I/O, and you will keep in mind the highest numbers displayed. Note that by default the I/O intensity shows strange value that we'll need to investigate. So don't remember the highest value for this column until you start the workload profile. We tweak the workload profile now to get the system to saturate as fast as it can. Let's start it and see what happens. Wait for the values to stabilize a bit before remembering them. In this example, we can see that the maximum delta reads is around 20,000. As for the I/O intensity, it seems to peak around 25. In this version, you need to modify the file displayed at the bottom of the screen. We can now stop the workload profile and continue to the next step. In this last step, we will now look at the dials to see the difference between the initial state and the saturation. The dial on your left shows the I/O intensity, sequenced by request. The dial on your right shows the delta of direct reads, reads by sequence. When the system is idle, we can see that the delta reads are not very high, which is good. Also, the I/O intensity tends to fluctuate a lot, just don't take that in consideration. We will start a common workload profile to see the impact of the I/O of normal queries against the system. We can see that it doesn't change much as expected. We now increase the number of connections for this profile. Once again, the values stay pretty low. Now let's try the I/O workload profile so we can compare. Begin with 10 connections. We now see that the number of direct reads is increasing. With more connection, the I/O intensity should get a higher value, which means the system is crawling. The delta of direct reads alone cannot tell us that there is a problem with I/O. We need I/O intensity saturation. I/O intensity keep increasing, so it's good. As we can see, with 14 connections in this example, both dials show that the system I/O is saturated. The saturation will highly depend on your system spec. That's why we need to find the upper bound limits first. Finally, we stop the workload profile to watch the system going back to its initial state. The dials now show the values we had at idle time earlier. Conclusion. To finish, we need to drop the table we had created. For this, we just click Run. And it's done. You can also take a look at tips to avoid I/O saturation on your left. Thank you for watching.